Beef stew is not just a dish. It's a tradition, a survival strategy, and culinary magic trick that turns humble, inexpensive ingredients into something greater than the sum of their parts. It's the kind of meal that carries with it the essence of home, no matter where you're from. It's warm, filling, and deeply satisfying. The kind of food that welcomes you like an old friend after a long, hard day. I'm Aaron Walker, and this is Beyond the Burner. Good cooking starts before you even turn on the stove. It starts with a sharp knife, a clean workspace, and a little organization. You don't want to be scrambling for ingredients in the middle of searing meat, trust me. First, the garlic. Mince it finely. The goal here is for it to melt into the sauce later, adding depth without leaving big chunks behind. Then move on to the onion. Dice it up, small but not microscopic, pretty much the same as the garlic you just did. It's going to cook down and help form the foundation of your stew as well. Leeks are next. These will go into a sachet, so you don't want to go overboard with the chopping. Just get them into pieces small enough to fit inside of a cheesecloth pouch. If you've never made a sachet de piece before, don't worry, we'll get to that in a moment. Now the star of the show, the beef. Forget expensive cuts, this dish is about making the most out of tougher, more affordable meat. Chuck roast, brisket, or even beef trim will do just fine, seriously. This recipe is a perfect example of working with what you've got and treating it with care. Start by patting the beef dry. This helps it brown better later, and browning equals flavor. Then cut it into cubes, about 2 inches wide. This size ensures they hold their shape during cooking while still becoming melt-in-your-mouth tender later on. At this point, you might be thinking, why not just buy pre-cut stew meat? And really, you could. But taking a few minutes to cut your own beef means you control the texture, you control the size, and ultimately, the final result. A sachet de piece might sound like something out of a high-end French kitchen, but really it's just a simple spice bundle that infuses the stew with subtle, layered flavors. Think of it as a tea bag for your broth, except instead of chamomile and peppermint, we're using ingredients that will turn this stew into something unforgettable. Take a square of cheesecloth and place in the center a few black peppercorns, a handful of parsley stems, not the leaves, a bay leaf, and your chopped leeks. And if you want it to be a little extra warm, you can add some white peppercorns like I did as well. Gather up the edges of the cheesecloth, twist it closed, and tie it off with kitchen twine. Trim any excess cloth and string to keep it neat. This little bundle will sit in the stew, slowly releasing its flavors without leaving behind anything that you have to fish out later. Step 3, the roux. If you've ever wondered what separates a decent beef stew from a truly rich, velvety masterpiece, it's this. A roux is simply a mixture of fat and flour cooked together to thicken sauces and stews. In this case, we're making a brown roux, which not only thickens the stew, but also adds a nutty, toasted depth of flavor. Melt half a cup of butter in a pan over medium heat, and then stir in half a cup of flour. Keep stirring, and it should look like wet sand. If it's too dry, add a little bit more butter, and if it's too wet, add more flour. The key is balance. Once it looks like sand, let it cook. Stir it occasionally, watching as it darkens from pale blonde to a rich brown. The moment it starts smelling like toasted nuts, you know you've done something right. Set it aside, we'll come back for it later. This is where things start to get exciting. Heat a heavy bottom pot, a Dutch oven is perfect, over medium heat. Add a little oil and then working in batches, sear the beef cubes on all sides. This step isn't just about color, it's about flavor. Browning the meat properly creates a deep caramelized crust that will make the final stew taste incredible. Season the meat with salt and black pepper as it cooks. Once each batch is beautifully browned, transfer it to a tray and let it rest with its juices. Those juices are important, so don't throw them out. With the beef out of the pot, it's time to start layering flavors. Add your diced onion and cook until it turns golden and fragrant, scraping up any brown bits from the bottom of the pan. These bits, also known as fond, are concentrated flavor bombs that should never, under any circumstances, be wasted. Next, stir in your minced garlic and add a few spoonfuls of tomato paste. Cook until the tomato paste darkens from bright red to a deep rust color. This caramelization intensifies the flavor, adding richness to the stew. Now, pour in a generous splash of red wine. Use a wooden spoon to deglaze the pan, scraping up every last bit of flavor from the bottom. The wine adds acidity, balancing out the richness of the meat. Return the beef to the pot, along with all of its juices. Add your sachet de piece, and pour in enough beef stock to cover everything. Stir in the reserved brown roux, making sure it's fully incorporated. Bring the stew to a gentle simmer, cover, and let it cook for about 2 hours. Stir occasionally to prevent sticking. This is where patience comes in. Slow cooking allows the flavors to develop and the meat to become fork tender. After 2 hours, skim any excess fat from the surface. Remove the sachet and taste the stew. Adjust your seasoning with salt, a squeeze of lemon for brightness, or a dash of hot sauce if you like a little heat, maybe a pinch of sugar to balance out the acidity. If the stew is too thin, let it simmer uncovered for another 20 minutes or so until it reaches the perfect consistency. While the stew finishes, cook your pasta. Egg noodles, pappardelle, whatever you love. Drain and either stir it into the stew or plate it separately, ladling the rich, meaty sauce over the top. Garnish with fresh minced parsley, taking a deep breath to admire your work. What you have now is a dish that doesn't just fill you up, it comforts you. Every bite is packed with layers of flavor, from a deep caramelized beef to silky savory sauce. It's proof that good food isn't about expensive ingredients or complicated techniques. It's about patience, care, and knowing that sometimes the simplest meals are the most rewarding. Now grab a fork and dig in. You've earned this. Thanks for joining me on this week's episode of Beyond the Burner. If you have any specific food you want to see featured, just leave it below in the comments. Be sure to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss any of my upcoming weekly videos. Follow me over on TikTok for quick 1-minute recipes, tips, and tricks. Follow me on Instagram for food pics, chef life content, recipes, and more. Stay hungry, everyone, and see you next week.